Today we are going to be discussing learning theories. Now, the learning theories that I adhere to, as well as the learning theories that I believe is the best philosophy for teaching education. So today, let's just start off by seeing the definition of what a learning theory is according to the Peak Performance Center. Learning theories are an organized set of principles explained how individuals acquire, retain, and recall knowledge. There are three different types of learning theories: of behavioralism, cognitive constructivism, and social constructivism. Now let's dig deep a little bit into what those three theories are essentially. So behavioralism, a view of that knowledge and learning. So behavioralism is specifically a knowledge that is based on behavioral responses. The cognitive constructivism is a system of cognitive structures that are actively constructed by learners based on pre-existing cognitive structures. And then social constructivism is a knowledge of constructed within social constructs and contexts, and their knowledge is built on communities. So as the one learning theory that I adhere to the most would be behavioralism. Now let's just do a little background of what behavioralism. So the view of knowledge, this is all according to Berkeley's view of behavioralism. The view of knowledge is a repertoire of behavioral responses to environmental stimuli. The view of learning, it's passive absorption of the predefined body of knowledge by the learner, promoted by repetition and positive reinforcement. And the view of motivation is eccentric. It's involving positive and negative reinforcement. That is a little bit about the background of what behavioralism is. Now, the reason why I tell you this is because my personal story with behavioralism. When I was, in school, in high school and elementary school, I loved behavioralism. The teacher that had those gold stars for when you did good and took away those gold stars when you did bad, those were my motivations. I remember specifically at one time when I was in elementary school, we had these things called tiger tails. Now, tiger tails are whenever you were speaking out in class or doing anything disruptive, forgetting your homework, anything like that. Tiger tails, you would have to take them and you would have to send them home to your parents, and your parents would have to sign them. And I know every single day that I went into school, I did not want to get a tiger tail because I did not want to have any of that negative reinforcement for home or anything like that. And so all I did was I just focused on my schoolwork and focused on everything, because I didn't want that negative reinforcement right away. However, I did love the positive reinforcement, because when I can take home to my parents saying I got this golden star and I got this thing, that was the thing that I was really proud of in my story. So I believe that this is a great learning theory, because for students that they can get something very positive in feedback from whenever they do good, but then they can also get something in very negative in feedback and something that can kind of correct them as they go. So that's the reason why I believe that it's a great learning theory for me personally. Now, the fundamentals, beliefs of this theory, they're also according to Fun Standing. There are different types of conditioning within this belief. So we'll talk a little bit more about this belief with the advocates, but just to give you an overview, there's classic conditioning. So classical conditioning occurs when a natural reflex responds to the stimulus. So we are biologically wired, so that a certain stimuli will produce a specific response. So for example, if all the time you are, anytime you stick your hand into a jar, the jar shocks you. And you're like, okay, I want to stick my hand into that jar, but it's shocking me. Next time you do it, you stick your hand in that jar, it shocks you. So naturally, with your biologically wired responses of what you're thinking every time I stick my hand into a jar, if that's the only jar you've been sticking your hand into, you're going to think that every time you stick your hand into a jar, you're going to get shocked. So that is essentially classical conditioning. Now, the next part of conditioning is behavioral operant conditioning. This occurs when the response to the stimuli is reinforced. Basically, the operating conditioning is a simple feedback system. So it's rewards and reinforcements. So just like I talked about before with my personal experiences with the behavioralism, there is a reward system to when students do good. So in the classroom, when students are doing good, they receive those awards, whether it's earning bucks in order to receive some sort of prize or some sticky hand or some slime or something like that, or they receive, essentially and reinforcement that they have to do. Like they have to write a certain amount of words, or they have to write this essay, or they get knocked down on this amount of points for participation. Something that matters to the student, so in that way the reinforcement, even though it is a negative reinforcement, it's something that helps them out. So those are the different types of conditioning. Now let's get to some of the advocates of behavioralism. So back in the 20th century, there was this man named Ivan Pavlov. He's from Russia. He studied the classical conditioning. So the way that he studied it is he noticed that his dog would salivate and saliva. So he did this, and this is a concept called learning through association. But he realized that he was wondering, why do dogs salivate? And so he realized that his dog was always salivating every single time it was hungry to get food. So he started making a system of bells. So he did bells every single time that his dog was ready to eat. So over time, the dog understood the bells, and then every time he heard the bells, he started salivating for his food. So that is the way that he started classical conditioning. He understood that after a certain amount of time, the dog understood repetitions and everything like that in order to go ahead and get the food and start salivating because he wanted food. So the second advocate would be B.F. Skinner, who rejected introspective messaging. So it says here, I got this from Innovative Learning. It says that some behavioralists argue simply that the observation of behavior is the best and most convenient way of investigating psychological and mental processes. Others believe that it is in fact the way of investigating such processes, while still others argue that behavior itself is the only appropriate subject of psychology, and that common psychological terms, beliefs, and goals have no reference or to refer to behavior. So they just believe that every single concept that we learn or we understand or anything like that is all behavioral. So essentially how you learn and get better at certain things is you learn because of the different behaviors that are around you or the different behaviors that you have. So how is this theory taught into the classroom? So going back to the Berkeley, what they kind of said is correct behavioral responses are transmitted by teachers and absorbed by the students. Creating good strategies and implementing a reward system, like I said before, is good for the behavioral type of classroom, behavioral learning styles. The classroom talks about that you can give some examples of ways you can implement this into your classroom, but you can use behavioralism to increase learning and decrease distracting students' behavior. When writing lessons plans, identify what knowledge and skills you want students to master. Determine how you'll objectively evaluate performance. Develop a system tracking students' performance and intervene if problems arise. Communicate to students your academic and behavioral expectations. So the reason why, I guess, my personal theory supports my philosophical view of education is because I believe that students should know their academic and behavioral expectations when they come into the classroom. Students should know whenever they go into life later on the academic expectations, the expectations at work, the expectations in social constructs, the expectations in behavioral settings. They should know these things, and they should know that there's repercussions for the things that they do, and there's also rewards for the things that they do. Now in the system, you do not hand out different rewards of different things for students not completing those things right. And the reason why that I believe that this theory supports my psychological view of education is because I believe that students shouldn't be given a free handout for certain things. If a student does not complete work, I don't believe that a student should be rewarded for not completing work. If a student does do the work, I don't think that they should be deemed for doing the work and the other students didn't. I think that if someone does excellent work, they should be rewarded for that excellent work. Just like in life, I believe that students or people, whenever they do a good job in their jobs, they should be rewarded for that good job. And then whenever they do a bad job, I think they should be deemed or discredited for the job that they did. Now with this system in the classroom, the students that excel can excel. The students that don't excel there has to be a better reward system and different expectations to implement to those students that aren't excelling like the other students. But find ways for those students, because every student's going to be different, of the way that they react behaviorally. And so just to conclude, behavioralism is the knowledge and behavioral responses in environments. So the environment that the person is in, that's behaviors that they'll have. There's classical conditioning, which is a conditioning that is biologically wired, as well as behavioral conditioning, which is something that's somewhat of a simple feedback system. Ivan Pavlov, he was the one who studied classical conditioning with the dog saliva, and then B.F. Skinner were two advocates in the early 20th century. The advocates believe that it is the most convenient way of investigating the psychological and mental processes. This theory is taught in the classroom with a system of reward system that will help out students, as well as whenever students have a basic view of the expectations in the classroom, they follow that view of those expectations in the classroom. And that is all that I have today. Behavioralism is something that I support, and I think that it is my personal psychology, philosophy of education in the classroom.